Welcome to this demonstration on and, or, and not logic inside of UiPath Studio. As we continue to do, open up Studio and let's open up and begin with a new project as a process. So I'm going to click on the process as new project in the top right corner, and I'm going to name this project and, or, not logic. And again, make sure that your path is exactly where you'd like the file for your project to be saved. So I'm cool with this spot. And I will say playing around with and, or, and not logic. Again, the description being something meaningful for you to understand when you have this open recent. What is this project ultimately about? Once you have your project name, your path where you'd like, and a brief description, simply hit create. As the file builds here, the whole purpose or premise for this particular activity, it really expands on our conditional decision structures that we just played around with a few moments ago. In this case, we're now going to get into a situation where our if statements or any type of conditional statement can be evaluated looking at multiple conditions instead of a single one. So if you recall back to our last exercise looking at if activities, or we looked at switch 2, we simply looked at a simple thing of saying is int number 1 less than int number 2, and end of story, end of that assessment. This idea of bringing in and or and not logic allows us the added capability to look at multiple conditions at the same exact time. So in order to demonstrate this, let's bring in another multiple assign like we had in our last activity. I happen to have mine in the list still here. If you need to search for it, simply type in multiple assign. Once you have that, I want to drag this multiple assign in and drag it in. I'm going to go ahead and add 2 levels here. I want to do it my variable declarations down here in the variables tab. I want to create 2 new variables. The first one I'm going to call BOL value 1. In this case, this is of type Boolean again. So I want these to be true or false statements. And bool value 2, also of type Boolean. And these are really to think about, let's say, conceptually, as I'm trying to demonstrate this, but doing it in a bit cleaner fashion. Imagine this being our statement we had a minute ago. Is int number 1 less than int number 2? Recall that statement always resulted to a true or false answer. Was int number 1 truly less than int number 2? This is really the answer to that question, is what this Boolean variable is trying to demonstrate to me. So playing around with it that way, what was the answer of that? And then let's say if we had another scenario here to say, is int number 3 less than int number 4? If we had an additional level of checks to do, that would be the condition here. So what I'm trying to demonstrate is, dealing with multiple asks in the same if statement, just doing it in a bit cleaner fashion where we're just looking at specific variables here. So bool value 1, and I could have done the same thing using the default values, but wanted to be able to demonstrate it here in the case of a multiple assign. So bool value 1, I want to set to true. Bool value 2, I want to set to false for now. So is int number 1 less than int number 2? We'll say in whatever those 2 numbers were in our last example came back with a true response. Yes, it was. And I said in the kind of the role play we're doing here, imagine if we had a second check in that same statement where we were saying is int 3 less than int 4. And in this case, I'm going to say in that scenario, it's false. So really just trying to default a couple of basic answers here to try to make our demonstration a bit cleaner and easier to read. So in order to demonstrate this, I'm going to bring in a if activity. I'm actually going to bring in two of them. I want to bring in another one right at, I want to stack these. So at this point, I've brought two if activities immediately underneath of the multiple assign. A single if here, and then right underneath it, another one. The reason I'm doing this is I want to be able to demonstrate both the and or condition side by side at the same time. The not logic we'll talk about once we conclude talking about this logic here of ands and ors. So our if condition here, I want to say bool value 1 and bool value 2. So now I'm checking both. Look, bool value 1 and bool value 2. Typo there, make sure you got bool value 1 and bool value 2. I'm checking, remember, int number 1 less than int number 2, and then I created this hypothetical situation here on the other side of int number 3 and int number 4, kind of using that same premise what we had before. On the other side, it's going to be int number 1 again. Int number, here is my, oh, I'm thinking the other project. So it's bool value 1 or bool value 2. Got myself confused there for a minute. So same thing, you'll notice the statements are roughly the same. One is saying if bool value 1 and bool value 2 as opposed to bool value 1 or, the important aspect here of or bool value 2. And trying to really come up with just a generic demonstration as to how these ands and or statements work. Notice it's allowing us to connect multiple statements into a single condition. When you do these, it's really trying to evaluate the whole statement collectively. Is this entire statement a true or a false response? And then on this scenario here, same thing. Is this entire statement true or false? All hinging on the use of ands and ors, which both serve two completely separate purposes, and we're going to demonstrate and talk through each of those accordingly. To bring this to a bit more light, go ahead and bring in four right line activities. And we're going to drop these into each of the four boxes here on both the then and the else condition of all the statements. And we're going to talk through the details of each of these. So what is going on with our logic here? When we have a and condition, the only way we ever get to the true side or the then condition is if the entire statement all the way through resolves to true. That means true and true is the only way we will ever get into this right line activity down here on the true side or the then condition of a if using and. So to demonstrate this, I want to say bool value 1 and bool value 2 are both true. That is the only way. I want to hover there for a minute so everybody has a chance to document this. Bool value 1 and bool value 2 are both true. That's the only way you'll ever get into the then side. The entire statement has to evaluate true. And what it's saying is true and true. Both are true. On the opposite side, it's talking about both of them, or one of them, I should say. Really, one or either or both are false is really the easy way of describing this. So this is to say bool value 1 or, not to be confusing here with it being an and, but what this is trying to say is either or bool value 1 is false or both are false. It's an either or type scenario here. Ultimately, the short answer here, if one on either side is false, or if they're both false, we're going to come down to here. Remember, the only way we get to true is if both of them are true. So in this case, as soon as one goes false, it doesn't matter either side, or if both of them collectively are false, we end up on the else condition over here. That's where we're saying bool value 1 or bool value 2 is false, or both are false. As soon as one goes false, the whole statement goes false is about the cleanest way of saying that. On the opposite side down here, dealing with an or condition, it implies exactly that. One or the other has to be true, or both of them, in order for this to come back as true. It's kind of similar to the else up here, but in reverse. The else of the and side. So it's really saying here, bool value 1 or bool value 2 is true, or both are true. Either both conditions are true, or at least, true on one side or the other is the other aspect of it. Simply, it takes one to be true in order to get into the true condition here. So this is true, or this is true, the whole statement becomes true. And much into the likeness of the true, true and true being true, the only way you get into the else condition on a or type condition is if both bool value 1 and bool value 2 are both false. That's the only way you'll ever get here. Both of them, and I guess to highlight the and here, both of them have to be false in order for the false or else condition. So it's what it's saying here is false or false. Both are false, so the whole statement's false. We end up in the else condition. So in order to demonstrate this, remember we got true and false here. This would imply we should hit the false condition on the and, but again, any of them being true, we should hit the true condition on the or. So if we run our automation here, I should have saved it. Notice here, either or is false, so the entire statement is false. On the other side, bool value 1 is true, so both statements, one or both statements are true. If we go and make it false and false, run our automation here. In this case, either or is false. So on the and condition, it's saying false and false, which we know is false. So that's where we're getting the false condition. But notice on the other side, false or false on the or, so both of them are false. So we end up on the else condition here. Continuing down that same path, remember it was true and false before. So the role played out the other way, not that it matters, but purely from a demonstration perspective. This takes us back to the last state we were in a minute ago, where in this case, the and side still has a false, so we know we should end up on the false side, and we did. We hit the false condition here, so the first line in our output. Then notice we have a true on the or side, so false or true is always going to make sure we yield the true side here. To go full circle, making everything true, this will be the only time we've now seen the true side execute on the and condition, because now both statements are true. Remember, false is going to play out the same way though, because all it takes is a single true statement. In this case, they're both true. So you notice both are true, so we end up hitting the true condition. That's the only way we'll ever get here. On the other side, true or true, everything's true. So you'll notice both are true, so we stay on the true condition here. One more interesting concept as part of this activity has to do with this concept known as not. So I want to bring in one more if activity, and I want to drag this underneath our ands and ors. And in my condition, I'm simply going to say not bool value 1. I'm not going to let this be a nested. I could allow this to be a nested condition, but for demonstration perspectives, I only want to look at bool value 1. But notice I've put this word not in front. In my right line here, I'm kind of stay with our same practice that we've done. I want to bring in right lines on both sides. I want to say bool value 1 is false, and you're wondering, well, why is it false on this side? This is backwards. Bool value 1 is true. This is what not is all about. It reverses the logic in this case. So if bool value 1 is truly true, if we had it set to true, which I believe our case is right now, bool value 1 is indeed true, the not reverses the logic. So in this case, if it's true, it's saying, is it not true? And not true makes this statement false. So that's where we end up on this right side. Bool value 1 by itself, in and of itself, is true, but putting the not reverses it and causes this statement to reverse itself to be false and not true, although the actual value inside is true. This is something we, as developers, try to avoid if at all possible, just because of this exact confusion here that comes into play. But sometimes, just given the nature of the logic that we're trying to automate with, you may be left with no choice but to bring in not logic into your automation. Again, if you don't have to use not logic, don't. But purely from a demonstration perspective, understand that this capability exists. But you can see right off the bat with a single simple example here, this logic can get very backwards. So again, if my bool value 1 was false, the not reverses it, it flips the logic, so now false becomes true. So that's where we end up on the true side here. To purely demonstrate this, remember bool value 1 right now has got a true value. So if I run this logic, we should see the bool value 1's true, but notice it's sitting on the else side because of that reversed logic. So as I run the automation, you'll see bool value 1 is indeed true, but that's showing up on the else side because of the not. If I flip the logic, hopefully everybody sees where this is going. Our code from a moment ago is also still executing, so you can see the flip-flop logic there, but I've now made bool value 1 false. You see bool value 1's false, but that result again is showing up and being being printed out from the then, or what normally would be the true side. But again, it's all wrapped around this not condition here. This right here concludes the discussion as it pertains to and or and not logic inside of UiPath Studio.